With Metro and the best deal in wireless, whatever your goal, however you hustle, you can rule your day. Get 2 lines with 5G access included for just $35 a month per line, period. With taxes and regulatory fees always included, so you know exactly how much you pay every month. All on America's largest 5G network at no extra charge. Plus, at Metro, get the latest 5G phones, like a Samsung Galaxy for less than $100 when you switch. That's the best deal in wireless, so you can take control of your day wherever it takes you. Metro by T-Mobile, empowering you to rule your day. Requires autopay. First month is $40 per line for 2 lines. Samsung A51 requires port from eligible carrier and ID validation limited to 2 per account. Coverage not available in some areas. See metrobytmobile.com or store for details.
The Peel Art Gallery, Museum and Archives, also known as PAMA, is pleased to partner with Caribbean Art Fair, Black Artist Network and Dialogue, and guest curators Karen Carter and Craig Manuel to present When Night Stirred at Sea, Contemporary Caribbean Art. This exhibit aims to connect Caribbean artists to the broader art world and includes local and international talent, including Brampton's own Janice Reed. The exhibit begins on October 29th virtually and eventually on-site once PAMA reopens to the public. For more information, please visit pama.peelregion.ca.
You are listening to New Theory Radio. Theory Radio.
Welcome back to New Theory Radio here on Saga 960 AM, the show where we theorize on arts and pop culture. My name is Nav Nanwa and I am your host. New Theory Radio is presented by PAMA, the Peel Art Gallery and Museum and Archives. And our next guest has been called a composer of infinite cleverness, a singer with a gorgeously deep and wary alto, a wicked multi-instrumentalist, and a provocative and supremely artful. This Toronto native has been favorably compared to Portishead, Beth Orton, Grace Jones, Feist, Laurie Anderson, and David Bowie, amongst others. But she draws on a hugely diverse range of influences, from folk to trip-hop, orchestral to techno, and distills them into a musical style that is unmistakably her own. Her 5th album, For the Birds, showcases the work of an artist who has truly arrived and is thoughtful and danceable, intricate and beautiful. And she's here on NTR to talk about it in more detail. Please to welcome Dinah Thorpe to the show. Dinah, how's it going?
Okay, thanks, Nav. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, I'm super excited to speak to you. I've been listening to For the Birds. I love what you've done with the album. It's very experimental. It has a lot of different influences, very much the ones I just mentioned in your bio. But I want to go all the way back, because with someone who's as diverse as you when it comes to your sound, I'm curious, how did you get your start in music?
Yeah, I've been thinking about this a bit because... So I got my start in choirs when I was young, and my sister and I used to play guitar and sing Indigo Girls covers at coffee houses. Yeah.
That's awesome.
And, it's a good way to learn harmonies, actually, because they've got some pretty fabulous harmonies. But, I actually didn't fall in love with writing music until I did some sound school courses, and I kind of opened the box of music production, like digital music production, and what kind of things are available in that realm. And I remember the first time that I sang along with a loop, like it was like a blues disco groove or something, and I just sang along with it, and I was like, oh, okay, I get it now. I see where this is going. And so I think since then I've been progressively falling in love with it for the last 12 years. So it's a long love affair now.
Amazing. And when it comes to, like, I guess the different sounds that influence you, are they rooted in just music that you're a fan of?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, a friend and I used to talk a lot about strings and beats. when people would combine strings and beats, that I've always found that to be, if it's done well, a particularly affecting thing to do.
Yeah.
And I think that speaks to kind of having some orchestral influences and also having trip hop influences and hip hop influences and techno influences. Yeah, and I know that everyone says this, and I'm sure it's true in lots of cases. I really, really listen to a crazy range of stuff. And right now, I have the new Jennifer Castle record, which is super beautiful and folky. And I just ordered this record called Visions of Bodies Being Burned by Clipping from LA. And they do some crazy noise. I mean, it's a rap sort of, but crazy noise and electronic. Yeah. And so I feel like what's happened is that it's all in here. It's all in here somewhere in all the parts. And then when I spend time in here, depending on how I'm feeling and what needs to come out, it all comes out.
It all just manifests right on its own, right? Yeah,
and I'll have moments of being like, oh, that sounded a lot like this, and that wasn't on purpose, but that sounded a lot like this, or that harmony sounds like this, or, that growl sounds like Fiona Apple, or I wish, but, that kind of stuff. And I think, I do think it all gets digested and not spat back out, because that's gross, but you know what I mean?
Yeah, it's an interesting combination that you've been able to put together on this album, because it's in some ways it's very there's a big wall of sound that exists, but it's also very minimal at the same time. And it's to me, I think the perfect word, as I was listening to some of your songs, it just sounds clean. It's everything kind of lives on its own, and you can hear it clearly. And your voice it does a fantastic job and really bringing it all together and making it one cohesive unit. But yeah, I think about some of the hard beats you've been able to put on these tracks. I'm a guy rooted in hip hop. It was just bobbing my head the entire time. Oh, this is a knock right here. Yeah, no, that's amazing. That's amazing.
Thank you. I really appreciate that. I feel I love a wall of sound. I really, really love a crazy huge wall of sound. And then I also love when it drops to nothing.
Yeah.
I like to take you as far as you can possibly go in terms of tolerating an amount of noise. And then you drop off. And then the next thing is like some kind of beautiful, very plain, quiet melody. It's counterpoint. I really, really like to play with that kind of stuff.
It's almost like a reverse EDM drop, right? They're usually when you get to the EDM drop, usually when you start with the EDM song, it's super simple. And then once it drops, it gets overly complicated, but you're doing the opposite, but you're doing the opposite in a really awesome way. And I was reading one of your interviews where you mentioned that I believe the songs are about birds, or you started by just writing a couple songs about birds and all of a sudden the album just came to you. Maybe explain that process and what birds actually meant to just the influence of the album.
Yeah, it's funny. It was, it just came about from noticing that there were, I think at that time, there were at least 3 songs that had references to birds in them. Mm-hmm. And then, so I actually have had the title for a very long time, which is not something that's happened to me before. And then I did some research on For the Birds, I don't know if you're familiar with the origins of the saying. I was not, and I know that it's, anyway, so I did a little bit of research about the origins of the saying. Horse poo in the street.
Yeah.
That birds would come and peck at.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of where the saying comes from. So it's poo for the birds.
Yeah.
And so then immediately I was like, oh, this is what it is. It's got a double meaning. This is already it. Yeah, and it's funny. I think it's partly being choosing to be trapped in here. I hear birds a lot. I record birds a lot in the world. And so it wasn't on purpose. It just happened. And when it's not every song on the record, and it's not on purpose. It's just, I had a whippoorwill sample that I recorded that I loved. Mm-hmm. There was a blue jay outside my window one time when I was trying to record, and it was so noisy. I was just wrote a lyric, super pissed about the noisy blue jay. Anyway, and then the last reference is kind of a queer reference, because it was actually my partner who realized, For the Birds also means for the women, right? And I was like, oh, okay, well, sure. Why not? I mean, not that it's exclusively for the women, but I'm very, very happy to make a record for the women.
I always love when you arrive at something, whether it be a saying or a title, in your case of an album, or even just the name of something that you're working on. And to you, it's almost like, eureka, oh my God, I have it. And then slowly, as you really think about it, it sounds like you did your research. How those other meetings like also relate to what you've put together. Like, I always found that to me just sounds like destiny, right?
Totally. And it also, I think, contributed to this. Like, for me, I really, really thought of this record as a project, like the whole thing, start to finish, the packaging. Like, this was the first time that I did my own package design, because
Nice.
I just like had an idea. I had an idea about what the photographs were going to be like. And so, yeah, I think having the title made sense in that way. And when I was applying for grants for this record, I already had the title. Like, that's never happened to me before.
Yeah, no, it's good. It's good. And the lead single is the Spring Flowers. I'm loving this track. Like I mentioned, it has a good bop to it, and it builds really nicely. How did this one come about?
So I was mentioning earlier that my creative day mornings usually involve going for walks. And in early pandemic times, that kind of became more significant, like, because I could still do it in exactly the same way that I always have.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it was completely different. Like, it was terrifying and weird. And it was before we knew much about how you could catch this thing. And like, I still had to go outside. There was no question I was going to be going outside, but it was like pretty terrifying to be outside. And anyway, I guess because, they weren't mowing Queen's Park as much as they usually do because of COVID, there are these huge patches of crocuses in Queen's Park that I've never seen before, like huge, beautiful crocuses. And then I went closer to them and I discovered that in almost every single one of them, there was a bee. It was like totally, totally beautiful and amazing. And so I just stood there for a long time and stared at them. So that's what I do. And then, the early sunshine, because it was March. So it was very, very early spring, and it was warm, nice, warm sunshine. And then the birds, of course, because they're always the birds. So it's kind of like finding things to cheer yourself up in a moment that's really, really, really terrifying and difficult. And then the hold yourself the gentlest is kind of, I heard an artist recently talking about any advice that it seems like I'm giving to other people, I'm actually giving to myself. And that's absolutely the case here. It was just like, be kind to yourself in this moment. It's such a difficult moment. And that song actually came together for me relatively quickly. Like, I would say inside 2 weeks.
Wow. For the Birds came out last week, November 27th, I believe. Yeah. And what's next?
Yeah, it's a good question. Well, at the moment, so my only other creative medium is that I build things like for my house.
Nice.
And so at the moment I'm working on a closet made of steel pipe and like old wood from barns.
Wow, that's cool.
So that's what I decided to take a week off studio time and work on that this week. Although I think it's probably going to take me another week, because that's what always happens, because there's a lot of painting to be done. There's a little thing in the back of my head, I think partly because it's the holiday season, that I feel like there needs to be a very, very gay duet. I feel like there are all these very, very famous man-woman duets.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of working its way back here, is I think I need to write a duet.
Do it.
And then sing it with someone. Yeah. But I'd like to be able to do it when we can make a really cheesy video for it in person.
I love it.
Yeah, I'm actually working on a video, with the filmmaker Gabrielle Zilka, on a video for the Birds. So the title track of the record, we're working on it. I think that because of COVID, it's tricky to schedule, but we are working on it now. And then, I was just lifting weights in my basement before this, because it's the only place that we can do that at the moment. And the good news is about doing it in the basement, that it can kind of turn into more of a dance party, which it actually does for me.
Awesome.
And I was thinking about trying to create some kind of queer-friendly dance party when we are allowed again.
Dinah, this was an awesome chat. I must say, I urge everyone to go check out For the Birds. I think it's a wonderful piece of work. You definitely have put your heart and soul into it, and if you listen to it, you can hear it, which is great. If anybody wants to check out the album or wants to learn more about what you're doing, or if you're available for home recos, this is your opportunity to promote yourself, because I might ask you later.
Oh my gosh. I will totally talk to you about my pipe closet. There's no question. I will absolutely talk to you about it. I will probably not build one for you.
That's okay. No pressure.
Yeah, so the new record's on Bandcamp, so you can just find me on Bandcamp. And yeah, I have a website. It's just dinahthorpe.com, and feel free to email me through that. You know, I'm always happy to hear from people.
Excellent. Well, that's Dinah Thorpe. Go check out For the Birds, available now on Bandcamp, and we'll provide all of the details on our socials as well as our podcast description on Tuesday. We are going to take a quick commercial break, and then we're going to have more New Theory Radio here on News Talk Saga 960 AM.
When no one else is holding you, be breath, be movement, be sound.
You are listening to New Theory Radio.
I'm trying to make it to a land of promise. The how is the sweat on my brow when hands are honest. I don't need much, my plans are modest. Saving money so that my kids will have for college. Staring at the map, looking at the land astonished. It's all feeling is out of reach as the hand of God is. I was trying to make it there. Pull up my stakes and no mistakes are clear. I know to never put my faith in fear. Waited on opportunities, hoping that they'd appear and we play by.
And we are back here on New Theory Radio, here live on News Talk Saga 960 AM, the show where we theorize on arts and pop culture. My name is Nav Nanwa, and I am your host. New Theory Radio is presented by PAMA, the Peel Art Gallery, Museum, and Archives. And my next guest is someone who's no stranger to NTR. They're actually someone who's been on the show quite a lot, but for good reasons. We definitely love having him here on NTR whenever we can. And he just actually, you may know him as a rapper originally, based on a lot of the accolades he's been able to get with his previous work. But he's joining us on NTR this week as an author, as he just put out his new book called Keep Moving On, The Migration of a Punjabi-Sikh Family. And I'm very excited to talk to him about it, because this is actually, I've actually known about this book for quite some time. So to actually see it physically come out and become a thing that everyone is checking out is truly amazing. It's our good friend Noyz joining us here on NTR. Noyz, nice to talk to you, man.
Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, first and foremost, man, congratulations. I remember even just hanging out with you in Austin, Texas in 2016, and you just telling me about this book idea and just something that you've always wanted to do. And man, you were grateful enough to give me an advanced copy a few weeks ago. And I must say, dude, it's even knowing you and the friendship you and I have, I still felt when I was reading it that there was still so much more to who you are as an artist and just the experiences that you've been able to have in your life. And this book in particular, to me, is such a tribute to not only, your family, but to every immigrant's family, because I think there's so much that while I was reading that I could definitely relate to as I was taking it in. But how did you get this idea? Like, I remember you mentioning it to me and you really wanting to do something like this. But when did you decide, you know what, I think I'm ready to write a book?
I think the idea for the book was something I had in the back of my head for a number of years. I think even going back to 2011, 2012. And a lot of it, or the original spark for the idea, kind of came from just the way I was raised. My parents, grandparents, aunts, uncles, they didn't really talk a whole lot about, where they were from, what their early years in Canada were like, why they had to leave home to come out west. So I just had a lot of questions. And I think in 2017, when one of my uncles passed away, my grandma passed away, I kind of felt it was a deeper sense of loss. Obviously, you're dealing with the grief of losing somebody, but there was a part of me that kind of felt like I lost an opportunity to really get to know these people on a deeper level and really get to know their stories. So in 2017 was when I finally started acting upon this idea that I had of wanting to document these old family stories. And originally it just kind of came from this place of, wanting to preserve this and wanting to hear these stories before I lose anybody else.
Yeah. And you definitely get a sense of that, because in the first chapter, you definitely outline where the book is going to take the reader. And one thing that really stood out to me in the first chapter was just you talking about how for a lot of people, they may not feel like their life story is worth sharing, because they may feel in their mind that, I haven't really done a lot. I've lived a pretty simple life. Like I work every day. I take care of my family. I eat, sleep, breathe. There isn't much to it. But I know you referenced a track by Shad in the first paragraph, and how the person, like how crucial it was to carry on stories, because to your point, stories do get lost. And I think about, as I've gotten older, and I'm sure you go through the same thing, as you start to see people, especially elders around you, get sick or just get older, you start to really think about, like, how was life like for them? Like, why haven't I had a deeper dive of a conversation? But why was it so important for you at the beginning of the book to really solidify that no matter who you are, your story is worth telling?
I think actually that first chapter was one of the last things I wrote for the book. Yeah. And I think it kind of came from this conversation I had where from last year, where I was out in England with some cousins, and I was hanging out with cousins of cousins, and I was explaining the concept of the book. And one of them said something along the lines of, have you lived enough of a life to have something to write in a book? And it just kind of got me thinking a little bit deeper, where it's like, even if, we haven't lived this crazy, rock star type life, there is still stories that we can tell, and meaningful stories that, regardless of where you come from, what your age is, what your background is, on a human level, we can still connect to some degree. And that's why I wanted to focus on, like, the family narrative. Like, whether or not you're Punjabi, whether or not you're Sikh, there are still parts within the book that you can probably see parallels of within your own family as a reader. And I think that's the thing I just wanted to highlight, was just, even though it is a personal story, there is a universality to it that a lot of people can connect with. And that universality is ultimately what makes us human. And every human has a story to tell.
Yeah. And I you definitely do a fantastic job in sort of bringing that to life. And it's no secret that the book itself, you deal with some pretty heavy topics throughout it. Like it's even as you get into the second chapter, it's pretty much a description of your Thayaji's funeral, and just how your dad played a role within that, and just his journey and some of the discrimination that he dealt with, kind of coming to England and trying to find a job. And then you also get into some more personal stuff, like the death of elders, the sickness that your mom is going through, currently going through right now, and just even the impact that it's had on your life as well, and you as an individual. When did you make that decision to really get super personal? Because even in a biography sense, and I know this is a biography of your entire family and it's really centered around your dad, sometimes there's certain things that people want to leave out because they just maybe they feel, hey, I don't want to go into that because it's too personal, but you really open yourself to it. And I think that's what really makes it such a captivating read. When did you make that decision to really just tell it like it is?
It came pretty late into the process. So I'd say earlier drafts of the book, I just tried to focus more so on the immigration narrative. What was life like in Punjab back when, my parents were younger, 50s, 60s? What was life like for my dad when he left home, his travels, and what were those early years like in Canada, in Toronto, when they got here?
Yeah.
But it was difficult for me to remove the context from which I was having these conversations with my family. Like I mentioned, in 2017, my uncle passed away, my grandma passed away, and my mom was diagnosed with cancer pretty much all within, a 4-month period. And all those losses was really what led to me and my dad finally sitting down with each other and having these conversations. So it was difficult for me to separate me and my dad having these conversations, but also not talking about the fact that it was this illness of my mom that kind of brought us together to have these conversations in the first place. So earlier drafts were, like I said, just very much focused on the migration, but then to really wrap the story up and to really help me process some of the emotions of what we were dealing with in the present, I felt it was important for me to talk about what was happening in the present, because like I said, some of these conversations me and my dad were having, we're having these conversations on the way to the hospital to see my mom, or we're having it, after we had come back from a chemo session, so it was difficult to separate the two and just have them not have any sort of overlap when so much of who my parents are, like their personalities, things that matter to them, shines through in the way they care for each other. And dealing with this sickness was a way that I felt kind of helped me process their relationship or understand their relationship a bit more. And I think it provides the reader with a better context as to who is this person, specifically with reference to my dad, and how what he had to do for my mom throughout the course of her sickness was similar to what he did for the family when he left home in order to provide. Yeah.
It's the same type of situation playing out, right? Obviously different circumstances, but there's some sacrifice being made. There's a lot of learning. There's a lot of just going all in without knowing what to do next. But that to me is the genesis of a lot of the struggle that a lot of immigrant families face, right? When they come to a place for a new time, or for when they come to a place for the first time, it's such an eye opener. And to me, what really strikes me, and I'm glad that you provided more context, and this is something that I've been more proactively trying to do in my life, especially as I get older, as I've become a parent within the last year, is just trying to get to a lot of these anecdotes like a lot earlier. Like it does make total sense that for someone who gets sick, right, and to want to try to preserve as much as you can, and that's when you start having some of these deep conversations. I think there's also an interest in trying to not use that as the only way to have those conversations, like trying to have them almost proactively. Like, have you had anyone reach out to you about that, being like, hey, this book really inspired me to want to just pick my dad's brain about what got him here?
Yeah, actually, I've had a few people mention or just reach out after, I've kind of had a conversation with them about the book, or after they've been able to read a few chapters, and they've kind of expressed those same sentiments that, reading the book or hearing about the book made them want to understand their own family history a bit more. So, a friend of mine, she was mentioning how she has family out in the States. Yeah. And she's like, given everything's locked down, she's like, it would be a great time to actually speak to folks and really get these stories down without any sort of distraction. So I think, and that's one of the things, I wanted to stress with the book is, to make the most of the time that you do have with the folks that are around you while they're still here.
Mm-hmm. What was the hardest part when putting this book and the EP together? Would you ever come to a point where maybe you felt, hey, you know what, Noyz, I'm a bit over my head right now?
At some point I was like, a number of times actually, I was like, man, I don't even understand how a book gets completed, or how it gets, after it's written, how it gets edited. So it went through a lot of restructuring. You know, it's like I kind of had to reimagine how I wanted to tell the story many times before the book kind of got to the state that it's in now. And then as I was putting the music together too, the music was the fun part. The book was the hard part. Because with the music, it's kind of an extension of the themes that are in the book.
Yeah.
So with the music, it was just like, how can I have fun, you know, collaborating with folks and tell these same stories, but do it in a different way. So the music was a kind of a place to connect with people and collaborate and have fun. But the actual writing of the book itself was kind of a place to really process a lot of difficult emotions. And after the emotions have been processed, try to, you know, put on the editor hat and try to figure out how do these pieces all fit together and still make sense to a reader, but also tell the story in an intriguing way at the same time. So there's a lot of different roles that you take on in the process. Like you're executive producer, you're a rapper, you're a writer, you're an editor.
Yeah.
So it's a lot of, you're juggling a lot of balls at the same time.
Has writing this book made you a better MC, you think? Like, because you've always been someone who's been known for their lyrics and their bars, and again, I have a feeling, especially with how long I've known you for, especially within the GTA, you've almost become like a rapper's favorite rapper, right? Like people like know Noyz, and it's like when growing up, when you would tell someone you listen to real hip hop, you would always name drop Talib Kweli or like most. Now it's like, oh yeah, I listen to like real hip hop in the GTA, you know, Noyz. It's like, oh crap, yeah. But again, being that you've been known for lyrics, being that now you've been able to put a book together, you know, 230-page book. Do you think that's done anything to your writing as an MC?
I think it certainly helped with the creation of the EP. Because when I write rhymes, I like to have a topic to go off. It's difficult for me to just sit down and just free write bars. I like to have a topic or a theme. And when I was putting the EP together, the book provided so many different themes for me to draw from. So it allowed me to kind of go in depth with a lot of different ideas. So I think the book was just this expansive foundation, and putting the EP together was fun. It just allowed me to really do a deep dive onto these concepts that sprang up in the book. So I certainly think like my rhymes on the EP are some of the strongest that I've ever done. So I think, there was a lot of overlap with this connection as far as, you know, the book influencing or strengthening the songwriting.
I break bread where I lay my head. So one day they'll know. Either keep it safe or take a leap of faith. No belief in shaking sleeper, so I chase a dream awake. Where the zenith of a leader is how much that he can take. I perceive it as what he gives and what can he create. I shake freedom from the last. Look at my past. When I was cornered like a rook, and now I'm pushing it fast and hopping over the edge, growing my wings on my way down on this road. I don't know where it heads. In this land where nothing is promised, the bright lights, no dull in the wattage, the loud city that's numbing the silence, where we feeling so alone, like loving forgot us. But there ain't no coming back with nothing accomplished. So I heed the plan for no other reason but to try to feed the fam. My first step on this long road to now we seeing the scene expand and carry this journey that we began. Yeah, land of promise.
You are listening to New Theory Radio.
Broken by the cracks in the sidewalk children, or turned out okay despite the odds children. Call us unworthy children, born on the wrong parallel of the wrong side of the earth children. Call us unteachable immigrant children, or angry brown children, or your success story children. Or simply call us children, so that for once, that is what we are allowed to be.
Did you always think about doing a combo, or at any point were you just thinking, hey, book first, and then if an album comes after, it'll happen?
I think it was once I'd been writing the book for quite some time, maybe close to a year, that's when the idea for the EP or the soundtrack came up. In a way, it was kind of, it came from a place of insecurity. Because, I've been doing music for 10 years. People know me as an artist or as a rapper. So it kind of felt, I wasn't sure how people would take it, for me to pivot and do a book and release a project that's not music. So there was a part of me that felt I wouldn't be accepted as an author. So I figured, hey, if I put this book out, if people don't really like the book, well, at least they'll have some good music to listen to at the same time. But eventually, I saw it was a really cool opportunity to do something special. And it kind of, I was really inspired by or influenced by Dusty Loops with the whole idea of, putting together this Lo-Fi Glory album, but combining it with a photo gallery or combining it with, street photography. I thought that was a really cool, combination of different mediums. And the more I sat on this idea of a book and a soundtrack to a book, it kind of felt like a natural extension of like things that matter to me, but people don't necessarily associate as coming together, but really a chance to do something special and do something unique. So initially it started as like, from being insecure and being kind of scared and not knowing how it would be perceived, but at the end, finding it as a place to really share all my strengths.
Yeah, it's a great entry point, right? Like I think being and with you telling me that you had to worry that if you wrote a book, someone was going to message you and say, "Hey, bro, stay in your lane." Like I don't know how much I believe that, because I think again, you've always been known for just you being lyrical. So I think if you just put out the book on its own, I think people were like, that's cool. Like he's a good writer, so it makes sense. But
that's cool, but where's the bars?
There's always that one guy where, hey, where's the lyrics at, bro? But I do think it's a smart tactic on your end to combine both. Number one, the album is fire, and it's an EP, so it's very easily digestible. And we've talked about EPs versus albums numerous times on NTR. But I do think it's a good entry point, because I admittedly I'm not a big reader, and I want to be. And I think my biggest challenge with reading is number one, it has to be something that I'm very much interested in. Number two, I need to find the time. Yeah. But without even having the friendship that you and I have, I do think, based on the power of that EP, that if I just solely listen to the EP, that I'd be more inclined to pick up the book. 'Cause it's like, wow, these are some deep topics. There's probably more in this package that Noyz has been able to put together. So to me, I think it's a clever way of getting your audience who may or may not read books all the time to check out a book. And I think that's a huge win, because man, just the power of books, like especially now with me being a father, like seeing how my daughter gravitates towards books. It's, to me, it feels a lot better than her swiping on a phone or a tablet, right? Like I think fundamentally it just shows some level of curiosity, and I think people need to just zen out sometimes, man. There's so much information being thrown at them. Just pick up a book and just zone out and get immersed into the story.
Yeah, and I think now too, especially everything with the pandemic, we're always on our screens. We're on
all the time,
Zoom meetings for work, or we're working off laptops, or we're working off our phones. We don't have those moments, like when we usually would be commuting, let's say in the car or in the train, where we can just listen to music and just tune out distractions. So for me, I know sometimes I'll have days where I'm just like, I cannot look at a screen anymore, and I'll go to a book, or I'll just go for a walk and put my headphones on. So I've found music and books to be a really great outlet to kind of take a break from the new normal, as we've been calling it.
What did your family think? Because again, we talked about that. Talked about earlier about how you deal with a lot of heavy topics in the book throughout. How was that follow-up conversation with your dad? Like, was the family okay with some of the information that was shared? Was there any hesitation?
To be honest, I don't even know how many of my family members have read it.
No. Okay, we'll skip that question.
Like, I remember when I got the first copy of the proofs back,
Yeah.
And I was super nervous to show it to my mom and to show it to my dad. And, they held it, they looked at it, they kind of like quickly flipped over through a few pages, maybe read a couple lines, and they handed it back and they're like, okay, good.
Good job.
Good job. And I guess that is the most encouragement you can expect from an immigrant parent. So I guess that's a stamp of approval there.
Yeah, there's probably a sense of trust there too, right?
Yeah.
Probably like, hey, our son is an artist. He's talked about a lot in his music. We've trusted him when he's done that. We trust him when it comes to this body of work that he's put out. Yeah,
and that's something I certainly kind of struggled with during the writing of the book. It's like these are people's lives, and you want to do justice when you're telling their stories.
Yeah, exactly.
And I took a lot of care to edit and to make sure I was telling the stories in an honest way, and doing right by the people who I was talking about as well.
For anyone that picks up, keep moving on, and decides to really immerse themselves into what you've wrote, what do you want them to get out of it?
I think just going back to what we were talking about earlier, the whole idea of we all have a story to tell and all our stories are meaningful. And I think especially in the context of, living in the GTA, we hear so much about, diversity and multiculturalism, but we tend to talk about it in a very kind of one-dimensional way. Like it's more so like it's music and it's food and it's clothing, and it is all those things, but there's more to it. There's more to explore, I think, when we talk about diversity. Behind every person who is here, who is, not, 5-6 generations Canadian, there is a story to tell behind why they had to leave the place they called home. There is a journey as far as how they got here, and there's a struggle as far as how they got established once they got here. And I think to really understand diversity and to understand multiculturalism, we have to know those stories as well, to really, to fully contextualize and to appreciate what it means to live in a city or in a region like this. So I guess the main thing I would impart to folks who are interested in checking out the book is, there are probably untold stories within your own family and within your own life that you don't know about or have a lot of relevance to our world today. For example, like I heard when I was doing the interviews for the book, I got to learn about my family's connection to the Green Revolution and my family's connection to 1984. And, we see the protests in Punjab today. This is all still relevant, very much so. So yeah, that's one thing I want to stress is like, we all have important stories to tell. And by talking to the folks who have lived through, these generations with so much change, social, technological, political, economic change, there's so much that we can gain. So yeah, just, sit down with your family and get to learn these stories, because these are stories that will always be relevant.
And to add to that, like, I think if you have those conversations with your elders, it's a good way to check yourself too, right? Like I find that as a second generation and being the parent of now the third generation, like as you kind of move and progress, the fear is that these stories, these struggles just become lost and there's no appreciation at the end. And we may feel like, man, COVID is tough. We're going through so much. But even like having some of the things that we were able to get from a resource standpoint this year are very much considered a luxury versus some of the immigrant experiences from those that came in the 70s, 80s, and even 90s, right? And as I was, again, I've had some moments where I myself have had some conversations with my parents or just some elders, and I've seen their struggles, but it really hit me also while I was reading the book, like hearing about your Thaya specifically and the struggles he had just finding employment. Like, man, if that was to happen today, you just would go on Indeed and just keep applying, right? Like there was none of that back then. It was almost like you had to settle and you had to just do whatever you could to make ends meet because you had no choice.
Yeah. And, just thinking about the way my dad grew up, and I describe it in the book, in a place with, no electricity, no running water, a house made out of mud with, upwards of 7, 8, 9 people in the house. And I'm just one generation removed from that. Yeah. It certainly, it humbles you to think, where we started and what we had to grow through.
So now that you've written a book and you got this first one under your belt, do you think you'll be writing another one? And if you are considering writing it, do you want to maybe share any topics that you're thinking about?
Yeah, I do have the itch to write another one. At this point, I'm not sure what idea I want to explore. I think if I do write another one, it will probably expand the story out, whereas this book is very much focused on my family. I think if there was a second one, or when there is a second one, it might kind of shift the perspective and look more so at the Punjabi community in the GTA. I'm not sure how I want to tell that story, but that's kind of where I'm leaning for right now.
Yeah. Man, this is it's a piece of art, man. What you've been able to put out, it's truly phenomenal. I want every listener to please check out "Keep Moving On," the migration of a Punjabi-Sikh family, written by our good friend Amrit Thung, aka Noyz. What's next? What's on deck? The book is out. What else do you have planned from now until the end of the year and heading into 2021?
It's weird to put out a project and not be able to do shows, and to even this interview, like we're doing it over Zoom.
I know.
So
it's weird.
So it's hard to to conceptualize how to market or how to push a project in this era. Even when I was conceptualizing the grant application with the Ontario Arts Council, I kind of had this idea of a release event that I wanted to do, where it's like all the artists on the soundtrack would be, we'd be in a venue and we'd perform the soundtrack together. But we can't execute that. Wanted to tour like book readings and things like that, but again, can't execute that at least for the time being. So yeah, it's a lot of it is just kind of figuring it out as you go. I mean, a book is new in itself for me, but releasing art or releasing projects during COVID is still very new as well. So yeah, just trying to figure out, how I can talk to folks who might connect or might resonate with the message in the book, and try to find a way to shoot some visuals for the music as well. I think that's the focus for now.
Awesome, man. Awesome. But yeah, hey man, we're grateful that you put this out. I know, again, this has been something you've been thinking about for quite a while. So to see it finally come to fruition is definitely, just a fan of yours, is exciting. And I hope you do continue to write, man. Like, you definitely have a talent for it, not just within your lyrics, but just, again, it's a very captivating read. I'm not a big reader, like I mentioned, but I was hooked on it for a half an hour, close to an hour of just kind of, really hearing about your background and your family, and just the different things, different experiences that they've gone through to get to where they're at right now. If anybody wants to pick up the book, where is it currently available?
The book right now is currently available on Indigo, Amazon, Book Depository. For folks outside of Canada, or if you're in the States, it's on Amazon and Barnes & Noble. If you are in Australia, it's on Booktopia. Elsewhere in the world, Book Depository is a great resource. The full list of everywhere the book is available is on noyzhiphop.com. And the EP or the soundtrack, if you want to check that out, it's on all major music streaming platforms, so Spotify, your Apple's, Tidal, SoundCloud, AudioMac, Bandcamp. So wherever you check out music, it'll be there.
Awesome. Well, Amrit, congratulations. This is amazing. And thank you so much for coming on NTR to talk about it. If you ever want to do a live book reading, we're down.
Awesome, man. Thank you so much.
I'll literally give you the mic for the hour and you can just read a couple chapters from it whenever you're ready. But that's Noyz. Go check out Keep Moving On, The Migration of a Punjabi-Sikh Family, available at many locations. We'll have the information on our socials as well as our podcast description. We are actually, we're not going to take a commercial break. We're actually going to conclude this week's episode of New Theory Radio. So I wanted to thank all of you for tuning in. If you want to connect with me, it is at Nav Nanwa on Instagram and Twitter. If you want to connect with New Theory Radio, it is at New Theory Radio across all social platforms. Big shout outs to our wizard behind our graphics at Colorblind Photography _ aka my brother Amit Nanwa, as well as special shout outs to Dusty Loops, the wizard behind our theme music, and some of the other music that you hear throughout the episode. Thanks so much for tuning in, and you will hear all of us next time. Peace.
Who are you texting?
My therapist.
You text with your therapist?
Text, video chat, call. Yep.
That sounds too easy. How did you find her?
I just went to betterhelp.com/save. She's a licensed therapist and it's all online. I connect when it's convenient for me and don't waste time driving anywhere. Plus, it's affordable.
I wonder if I should try it.
It's great to talk to someone in confidence. She's helped me sort out quite a few things. And right now you save 10% off the first month when you go through betterhelp.com/save.
Betterhelp.com/save. Got it.
Present you is burnt out at your current job. But future you works at Geico. And future you is also a beekeeper.
Me? I don't even go outside.
Well, with Geico, you got a consistent schedule. So you are now one with nature, my friend.
So I've become a bee person?
Technically an apiarist. And yes, you also got a competitive salary, so you had the funds to start a new hobby.
All right. Give me that honey.
Virginia Beach. Start your future at Geico. We're hiring claim sales and service agents. Apply online today at geico.jobs/Virginia Beach.